Okay, beautiful souls. We are on episode 50 of the You Unlimited podcast. I am so grateful that you're here and you're on this journey with us. This has been such an incredible ride this year. I am eternally grateful for you leaning into this space, sharing your most precious resource with us, your time. And I just can't wait to dig into today's episode. But first, I just wanted to give a massive thank you to you because you guys are the ones that actually make this possible. So let's dig in. I am so excited about today's episode because this is going to be something that I think is going to be really supportive for those that are looking to start their own podcast or amplify the podcast that they already have going. Right. So I know so many of you that are tuning in are entrepreneurs, you're building a personal brand, you're wanting to amplify your voice. And so you may be questioning, does starting a podcast make sense for me? And does amplifying my current podcast make sense for me? So if that is you, you are in the right place. I cannot wait to dig in with you today because we're going to be talking about both the energetic side of the podcast, which I hear no one else talking about, and then simultaneously the tactical side, which I hear several people talking about. So this will be fun. I think I do tactical things different though than a lot of other people do. And so I can't wait to dig in with you guys on this in particular because so many people have asked me, I launched this podcast in, January of 2024. In March of 2024, 2 months later, it became a top podcast worldwide. And so many people have asked me, what are you doing differently over there? Can you guide me? Tell me more about what your process is behind the scenes. So I'm going to just completely share every single thing that I do that I think is actually very different from the way that a lot of people teach it. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to dig in with you guys. And I can't wait to see what happens when you start to take the things that feel like they're in alignment and just release the rest, right? That's what life is. We're meant to just follow what feels good, release the rest. Okay. So let's first start to dig into the energetics part of having a podcast and creating a podcast that's a top podcast worldwide. So first and foremost, is starting a podcast or is your current podcast in alignment with your soul? For me, podcasting is something that felt so high vibrational. I was so excited to actually dig into creating a podcast. So that's how I knew that it was in alignment with my soul, right? And what I mean by that is we only want to be following the things that feel exciting for us, that we have the vitality to really build and scale, because so often we're following other people's business coaching advice and we find ourselves building things that we don't want to show up for. And so then, of course, we don't want to do the thing. And then a few months later, it just dies out. And that's because maybe that wasn't your thing. Maybe long form, content like creating a podcast or doing long form videos is not in alignment with your soul. And that's okay. For some people, it's, I want to create a blog. I want to do, beautiful written posts on Instagram, those captions, right? Start to really lean into your strengths and start to lean into the thing that has you excited to show up week after week and serve. So that's number one. From an energetic standpoint, is this even in alignment with your soul? Because if it's not, I would say put it down and start to put your energy towards something that is. Or if it is, this is where okay, I've got the vitality to show up, not just week 1, month 3, but also 1 year in when I've been showing up week after week after week after week, right? For me, this is one of the most exciting things that I do. I just love it. I love showing up. I love serving. I love just asking God, source, universe, allow me to be a conduit. And then I just allow things to flow through me. So I absolutely adore this space. I love this space from the depths of my soul. So of course I want to show up week after week. It's one of my favorite places to serve. So with that in mind, that is definitely an energetic thing to tune into is this really in alignment with my soul? If it is, lean forward. If not, I would recommend finding what is. The other thing that I do that is very much so an energetic thing that I do is I bless and protect the space every time I'm about to record a podcast episode. Now, I have not heard of anyone else doing that, but I am very intentional about the energetic containers that I create, whether you are a one-on-one client, whether you are in my mastermind, whether you are listening to my podcast. I am very intentional about the energy that's in the space and the energy that is created. And so what that means is before I even jump onto either Zoom or an in-person recording, I am actually blessing and protecting the space that is both the recording space and also for each of you. So what that looks like is I actually, in the show notes, I'm going to be dropping a link to a 5-minute energy reset. download that because I utilize that exact tool to not only protect my energy, but to protect the room that I'm in and to share that out to every single one of your souls if it's in alignment with your soul. So I just set that intention of those that are magnetized into the space. Allow this space to really bless and protect you and for you to receive something so high vibrational and beautiful from the space. So I go into complete detail on how to actually bless and protect the space the way that I do it uniquely. So drop down into the show notes. It's going to be labeled the 5-minute energy reset. Utilize that for not only you, but also the spaces that you create, the rooms that you walk into, and use that to bless every single person that comes into contact with you if it's in alignment with their soul. So I always say, let this be the exact medicine that the souls that are magnetized in most desire to receive today. So I really deeply set that intention. I also ground with my guest. And what that means is the two of us are really coming together before we hit record. So I don't just want it to be like hey, this is the first time I've ever met you and we're tuning in now and we're just going to hit record and neither one of us feel totally comfortable in each other's energy yet. Absolutely not. I ground with the guest before. And what that means is sometimes if I don't actually know the guest very well, I actually will voice note with them before we even step into the Zoom room, right? Like I want to get to know them. I want to understand them. I want to better understand first and foremost, are they the right guest for the show? And secondly, I want to be in tune with them. I want to be in sync with them so that the two of us are really jiving and the conversation can go so much deeper. Because when we feel safe, we allow ourselves to open up and really allow the stories, the messages that people are most desiring to receive to move through us. But safety has to be created so that people can land in the space. So the guests that I have on, so that they can land in the space and really be able to open up and share things that they probably haven't shared anywhere else before. I hear that from so many of my guests. They say like, wow, I have literally never shared that story before. That story was so dear and close to my heart. I've literally never shared it anywhere else. It's because we've created a rapport between the two of us. And I've also grounded with that guest as well before we even hit record. So what does that mean? So I am first, before we even get on the Zoom, I have connected with them. The two of us are really like jiving. I'm making sure that they are in alignment with you guys, because you guys, this is first and foremost for you. This has nothing to do with me. I am simply a conduit for the messages that your soul is most desiring to receive today. So I get to be a gatekeeper on who then is coming into the space to then share their message. I want to make sure that they're in alignment with you, right? So I like to connect with them ahead of time, make sure that they feel like the right fit for the space, right? So that's first and foremost. The second one is when we jump on the Zoom room, before we hit record, I drop into a breathing exercise with my guest. So what that looks like is I always breathe in through the nose. I ask them to close their eyes. And then I breathe in through the nose all the way down to the soles of our feet, just grounding into the present moment. Deep exhale for both of us. And then I ask that we just do this 3 times together. We're just breathing together with our eyes closed. And as our eyes are still closed, I always say, God, Source, Universe, allow us to be conduits for the messages and the healing that people's souls most desire to receive today. That deep reminder that it's not about us. Allow us to be those conduits. Allow this to be the medicine, the unique medicine that people's souls are most desiring to receive today. Allow this to be us speaking from our soul, our hearts. Allow this to be fun. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And with that, taking one more big, deep inhale in all the way down to the soles of our feet, really locking that in, and a deep exhale out of the mouth. And slowly beginning to move our fingers and toes, slowly beginning to open our eyes to land back into the space, right? And then I hit record. So that allows the two of us to really be in sync, and it allows us to start to say, okay, we're grounded. We're here together. We are really in tune with each other. And I think that's a really big reason why the guests share things here that they haven't shared anywhere else, because they feel safety in their body, which is of the utmost importance for us to share anything that may be a little bit outside of our comfort zone. But I think that those are the stories that I hear from you guys that are the most connecting, are when people share the thing that they haven't shared anywhere else because they have a fear of being judged, or they have a fear of, oh, I didn't do that perfectly. That's the stuff that has me feel most connected to a guest, when they're like, hey, I totally royally screwed this up. Or, hey, this time when I was at my like absolute edge, here's what happened. That has me be like, oh, I'm not the only one that's taken to an edge. I'm not the only one that has those thoughts. Thank God. I feel so connected to this soul now. So there's some energetics behind that. Absolutely. So and with that in mind, again, use your intuition for the guests that come on board, right? I know when this podcast became a top podcast worldwide, there were so many people that started reaching out and being like, I want to be a guest. I want to be a guest. I want to be a guest. And I had to really tune in and say, does this person make the most sense for the audience? Because it's not about me, it's about the people that are tuning in and are listening. So I had to really tune in and say, well, first of all, is this person an entrepreneur that has built something that's 6, 7, or 8 figures and beyond? Because that's why you guys are tuning in. You're building something in alignment with your soul. You're really tuning into, what is my divine purpose for being here? So is this person living their divine purpose? Is this person really grounded and connected and someone that I admire that I would love to learn from as well? Right. So we really have to tune in and say, like, is this person in alignment with the entire scope of this podcast in and of itself? So, for instance, like, let's say you're religious and you're tuning into a Christian podcast. And then, the host is now bringing in a bunch of atheists, right? Or people of other religions. It might be like, wait, what is going on here? Interesting. And like, there's something to be said about a diversity of thought. So maybe we bring in some of those guests here and there because we want to be hearing, from their perspective, like, share with me more. We'd love to understand it if it makes sense. But ultimately, people are tuning in because of your secret sauce that you've brought to the space, because of the niche of the exact podcast that you've created. So it's really important to tune in and say, is this person in alignment with what the listeners have come here to find? Right? Do I feel like I'm in alignment with them? Do I appreciate their point of view? Do I want them to share more with the guests? Because your unique medicine is going to be something that resonates as the host. It's going to be something that resonates with the listeners. So it makes sense to bring in someone that complements that. Now, it doesn't mean they have to be in the exact same wavelength as you, but someone that deeply complements it so that it makes sense for then the listeners to say, well, I jive with this person as the host, and wow, I'm jiving with this point of view too. That makes sense. I'm so glad that they brought that person in, right? So just starting to really think through that. Use your intuition when it comes to the guests that are coming onto the space, whether you're having guests or whether you're doing it on your own. But if you are having guests, tune in and say, does this feel like it's in alignment? Because your intuition will never lie, right? So it's really important to say, like, does this person feel like they're in alignment with this space? And if so, amazing. Let's get to know each other a little bit more if they're kind of fresh to you and vice versa. And if not, it's okay to go ahead and put your people pleaser to the side, say, I love you, and also just share into the space, unfortunately, it's not in alignment, or however it feels best to be able to relay that message, right? Okay, beautiful. So let's start to dig in even more to some of the tactical things that I do behind the scenes that set me up to feel more energetically landed in the space. So these kind of work hand in hand. So another thing that I do is I actually have my guests fill out a form ahead of time. So I use JotForm. It's a super easy tool. And basically what they do is they start to fill out their name, their bio, their headshots, topics they love to discuss. They add in their links, whether it's for social or a free gift that they want to give into the space. This allows me to really make sure that the two of us are in sync before we step in, because I like to think ahead of time, like, what's a good angle that would be very enticing for someone that's leaning in that they would want to learn about, because I want to learn about that, because I know that that's the things that you guys have been saying you're curious about. So I like knowing ahead of time, first of all, what are the topics they love to discuss? What are their areas of expertise? Because sometimes we might know the guest really well, but then when I read their form, I'm like, wow, I didn't even know they love talking about that. I'm so much more curious about that, right? So this just allows you guys to take the conversation even deeper and really hone in on the thing that they do best, because they're going to tell you what they do best. And so it's really, really supportive to say, okay, amazing. Even if I'm best friends with this person, what is it specifically that they love to talk about from this perspective, which this perspective just meaning the niche of the actual podcast, right? So that's really, really helpful. Another thing that you can do that's really powerful is when you have the guests come on and they're filling out that form, you could also ask them, who are 3 other people that would be in alignment with the podcast that you think would be amazing? And that's a great way to start to meet other people that are, like attracts like. So if you're in alignment with this person that you're bringing onto the podcast, they clearly have 3 other people that would be amazing to have on the podcast as well. So I love being introduced to other people through my guests, because I'm like, okay, I am so in love with this guest. I'm so grateful for their point of view. And I would love to know other people that they think would be an amazing fit for the podcast. So that's been a beautiful way for me to start to expand my network and really connect to people that are deeply in alignment with this niche, right? And with this space. And so I definitely recommend that as well. Of just asking, who are three other people that you would recommend for the podcast? And it may make sense for you to introduce me to that person, right? So that's a really good way to start to network, to start to meet other people that are in alignment with the vibe of the space, right? Another thing, so go ahead and prep ahead of time, right? I find that to be really, really calming for my nervous system is when I read through their jot form, I will start to pull together some questions because that feels good for me, but I also leave space for flow, right? So even if like when I first started, I was like, here are my 10 questions and I'm going to keep it to the 10 questions. And then I recognized the more that I did it, the more in flow that I got, and the more that the episodes really seemed to flow. And so I started to say, like, yes, I can have like some, questions ahead of time, but ultimately, I want there to be space for flow because they're going to bring in something brand new into the space. And I'm going to say, oh, I want to dig into that. Tell me more. So make sure that you're really present with what they're saying. Because I know sometimes when we first start out, we're like in our heads a little bit versus in our bodies. That's why that grounding at the very beginning really helps for both you and the guest. But also, it allows you to say, like, let's take that in a deeper direction. Because if you have that question or if you had the intuitive hit that says, I want to learn more about that, I guarantee your listener does too, right? You are there to support your listener in better, deeply understanding topics that are coming up in the space. So let's say a guest actually brings up a word that you're like, I'm not actually even familiar with that word is, ask that question because if you're not familiar, the guest isn't familiar most likely as well. So I've had guests come on and they use the terminology that they use in their day to day. And I'm like, pause. What does that mean for someone who might be new to that, right? Myself included. And then as a listener, I am so grateful when the host does that because I'm like, yes, I had that question too. Now I don't have to go Google it. So just be thinking of your listener the entire time, or really just be tuning into like, what would your listener desire from this conversation? And so for me, I'm just tuning in to say, what would I want them to expand upon? And then also, what do I need a little more detail on because I'm not following, right? Things of that nature. Also, if you are interviewing someone via Zoom or you are, guiding them, you're hosting, you're having a beautiful conversation in Zoom, what I did when I first started out, and again, you'll feel a lot more space for flow, but what I started doing just super tactically is I would have the Zoom be about half the screen, and then the other half of the screen, I would have my questions there. So that way I'm not looking off to the side where they're written right up to the top left. I've seen people do that in some of their reels where they're like off looking at the questions. I find it a little distracting. So you could easily do a half and half screen where you're just making the Zoom box a little smaller and your questions are underneath it. This really allows you to really be honed into the audience, allows you to really kind of follow in that flow, especially when you're first starting. And then from there, leave space for that flow. I find that to be really, really supportive. So 10 out of 10. If you're first starting out, I find that to be really calming for the nervous system is to just have your notes there, but maybe on the screen versus off to the side. So it's not as distracting for the person who you're interviewing and then simultaneously the person who may be viewing it on YouTube, right? Another thing that I thought was really supportive for me was I hired an editor, right? So I actually, when I first started this podcast, I sat on some episodes for like 6 months. And I believe in divine timing. So there's a reason why I waited until January of 2024 to actually launch the podcast. But for me, I started recording in July of 2023. So I had all of these incredible podcast episodes and I just kept sitting on them because it felt really heavy to learn how to edit them because I knew that there needed to be an intro, an outro. I wanted there to be something in the middle. Some people call it an ad or a way to take it further in the middle of the episode. And so for me, what that meant was I had to learn tools. So because I was busy doing all the other things that I'm really, really good at, I didn't want to spend the time to learn something that I didn't really care to learn about, right? Like if I was curious about it, then yes, I would take a minute to actually say, I want to learn this trade. This is really going to support me. But for me, I decided this felt really, really in alignment to go ahead and hire out, right? And this was a game changer for me because now I can stay in my zone of genius. I can really like do the thing that I love to do most. And then I can hand it off to my incredible team member and her team to then say, amazing, let us do the rest. Right. And then that keeps me in my zone. It allows me to have this entire process feel light so that week after week I am showing up. Right. Because I know I've talked to people who have a podcast that they're like, I spend so many hours editing it. It makes it feel so heavy. It makes my episodes not come out as often. And so for you guys that are tuning in, there's some safety in knowing that this podcast comes out every single week. So you can say, okay, every Tuesday at 5:55 Eastern Standard Time in the morning, Christina is dropping another podcast episode. So that means I can look forward to that and I can have a calm nervous system around the fact that I know Christina is going to show up for me, right? Same for you. You want to be able to create that safety and connection point by showing up when you say you're going to show up, right? That has people not only believe in your podcast, but believe in you and then be able to then lean in further if and when it feels like it's in alignment, right? So my editor is absolutely incredible. She does the intro, the outro, the ad in the middle, which is amazing. And then she also creates social reels, which is beautiful. And so what I had her do for that is she has it in my brand colors, my brand fonts. I send her my logo so that it's cohesive when I upload it into all the different spaces that I upload it onto, right? And so another way to grow the podcast, and one of the ways that my podcast grew really fast, was I did collaboration posts on Instagram. So again, we're talking tactical, which basically just means that it's you and the other person tagged in it. So your audience is seeing it, and so is their audience. It's a great way for people to start to, people who are brand new, fresh to you, to start to get to know you and then lean in even further, which is amazing, right? And then one of the other things too, when you start to launch, when you have this out, when you're so excited about it, when you're ready to just share it, check on something called listennotes.com. It's a free tool to see what your global rank is, right? To start to see what your listening score is. That's a really amazing free tool you can start to tune into to say, like, what is my global rank, right? And how long are people listening? Really cool to start to tune in and connect to, okay, amazing. Where am I landing? Now, one of the things I recommend from an energetic perspective is don't check it every day. Take some time away, allow yourself to create a little bit of a spaciousness around that. But when it feels good, tune in, see where it's at, and see what you can do to start to amplify the space, whether it's energetic, tactical, whatever that could look like. Maybe it's posting on more than just Instagram. Maybe now you're posting it on YouTube or you're posting it on LinkedIn, whatever makes sense. TikTok, just starting to recognize where you can start to share it out, where new eyeballs can start to connect to the thing that you are sharing from your heart. So I hope that this was supportive. I would bookmark this episode. I would save it. I would listen to it again. I would actually take notes while you're doing it to start to really tune into the things that felt like they were in alignment from both an energetic perspective, but also a tactical perspective. Now, again, there's no perfect or right way to do this. What I tell everyone is follow what feels like it's in alignment with you, right? Follow what feels like it's in alignment with you. Because I always say there's an infinite amount of ways to do it, but follow the way that feels lightest for you, because that's going to allow you to, again, have the vitality to show up week after week after week. Okay? Amazing. Well, thank you again, beautiful souls, for tuning in. This is the 50th episode. I am eternally grateful for you for sharing your most precious resource with us. Again, your time. I am eternally, eternally, eternally grateful for you. And if you loved today's podcast episode, please give us that 5-star review. It deeply supports in other people finding the podcast, and it helps the collective energy rise, because I'm telling you, every single episode, I bless the space. I am adding like beautiful intentions around the space. So anyone that's tuning in is receiving that high vibrational blessing, and it creates more high vibrational energy in the collective. So if you're like, it would be really nice to drive to work and have less people flipping me off, maybe share the podcast out. Maybe start to, give us a 5-star review so that there's more high vibrational energy in the collective all the way around you, right? Okay, beautiful soul. I'm just sending you so much light and love. If you loved this episode, please, again, just give us that 5-star review and just send us so much love. Maybe reach out to me on Instagram if you have any questions. I would be more than happy to answer any of those additional questions you might have about podcasting. This is such a beautiful and fun space for me to play, and I am so grateful to play with you in this space. Mwah. Until next time.